My job in the ship was to work in a electronics lab where we repaired the black boxes that went in the airplanes, the electronics. And a couple rows back sat another sailor, a guy that was older than I was. He was from Knoxville, Tennessee, very mature guy. He was married, and began a friendship with him that I really treasured. It seemed to have everything in common. Well, I remember one particular day going back to see him, and he was sitting at his bench, and he had a Bible opened in a workbook. He was doing a Bible study of some sort, filling out questions. And I walked up to him, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I absolutely could not believe that this guy was reading a Bible. And I said, what are you doing? And he looked at me as amazed as I was at him, he was at me. And he said, I'm doing my Bible study. Don't you read the Bible? I said, dude, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, you read the Bible? I mean, I was amazed that somebody that was that intelligent could be that dumb, that would commit his belief to something like that. And talked about it for a few minutes, and I found myself just kind of like easing away from him a little bit. Didn't want to really get associated too much with a Jesus freak. And I said, do you really believe that? And he said, well, let me ask you this. Are you 100% sure that God doesn't exist? I mean, if you had to state your eternal destiny on it right at this moment, would you bet that there is no God? And I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what? Maybe 99%. I mean, virtually, I'm sure. And he said, well, you know, that 1% of doubt that you have is your mustard seed. And I said, really? Yeah. He said, that mustard seed is a significant thing for you, because if you plant that mustard seed, it'll change your life. Well, where I sat, I had a piece of test equipment in front of me. It was a console electronics test machine that I used to test my equipment. And the top of it sat about head level with me. And as I sat down in my chair, I looked up and I noticed a big, thick green book sitting on top of my console. And I picked it up and I looked at it, and it was the Living Bible, a big padded cover, fat green thing. And right away I thought, oh man, this guy's going to start hounding me now. He's going to start leaving his stuff where everybody sees it. And I looked at the guy next to me and I said, wow, man, who left this book on my bench? He looked at me kind of funny. He said, are you blind? He said, that book's been there since you came on board the ship this year. It's been there since last year. The guy that had your job the last cruise was a Jesus freak. He left it there. And I thought, this guy's busting on me. I got up and I looked at the top of the console, and sure enough, there was a clean spot where the book sat in the dust. And man, I felt chills run up my spine. I thought, this is the most incredible coincidence I think I can ever remember seeing. But I took the book with me anyway, and that night, I opened it up and I read chapter 1 of John. And I thought it was a great story, but I needed to be convinced. I mean, there was nothing convincing about it. It was just a great story. But I read chapter 1, and then the next night, I went to chapter 2. And I continued to read, and I got to chapter 18. And Jesus had been seized and taken before the high priest, who insulted him, interrogated him, talked down to him, and ultimately slapped him across the face. And it was like a slap to me when I read that. I put the book down, and I remember thinking, how in the world could somebody slap the face of the creator of himself? How could he slap the son that God sent down to save the world? And I felt those chills again, and I said, man, what am I talking about? This is fiction. This is crazy. It's old nonsense. And the funny thing is, something had happened. Something had changed within me. I believed those words. I believed that he was the Son of God. I don't know what happened. It wasn't something that I felt come over me, but I put the book away, and I just began a period of a couple days of real fear. I just tried to run from it, tried to deny it, but it wasn't where I could get away. I remember one night not being able to sleep, and I went up to the shop, and as fate would have it, it was Good Friday. We were out in the middle of the Mediterranean, and I went upstairs into the shop, and we had a TV lounge in the back. Back then we had a closed circuit TV in the ship, and there was always a movie playing on one channel. And I went into the lounge, and I looked around, and there was nobody there. And I thought, wow, this is really odd. Everybody should be in there having a cigarette, watching TV. And it soon became apparent why they weren't in the room. Up on the TV, they were playing some type of a story of the Bible. I think it was the greatest story ever told. And I looked up at the screen, and at the moment I looked, I saw the high priest slap Jesus in the face. Man, he had my attention. I walked out of the room, I went up on the flight deck, and I remember going through the dark passageways, thinking to myself, where can I go to run from God? How can I hide from him? I mean, he's real. He answered my prayer, he acknowledged himself. I know that he created me, and what can I do about it? And I acknowledged to myself that, hey, I believe this. And I couldn't wait till the next day to come and tell my friend. And I said, you know, something happened to me last night, and I believe. I believe. Well, he looked at me, and just the most joyful smile came over his face. And he said, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know. What do I need to do about it? And he said, well, you know, dying people can believe in their medicine, but if they don't take it, it's not going to save their life. And I said, well, how do I take it? And he said, well, I need you to pray with me. And he prayed this prayer of salvation. And I accepted Jesus as my Savior. And I can tell you that it changed my life. It began a different course for me from that point forward. The Sunday after I made the decision to accept Christ in my life was Easter Sunday. And my friend invited me to go to church. On the aircraft carrier, church was whatever space that you could put a church together with. And there was a part of the carrier called the forecastle or forecastle. It was in the front of the ship, and that's where the anchor chains came up through the front of the bow and went down into a locker. And it was a very large open space. And as I walked in there were chairs set up in a big semicircular fashion. I'm going to guess and say maybe it was big enough for 200 or 300 people. And we got there early, of course, and we went up right in the front row is where he took me to sit. And we sat down in a folding chair. And I got to tell you that the thoughts going through my head that day were, what are my friends going to think? You know, we're going to be pulling into port here in a few days. I always get together with the same guys. We always go out and we have a typical Navy Liberty or shore party, whatever you want to call it. And that wasn't going to be real consistent with the life of a Christian. And I was really kind of wrestling with how was my life going to change? How deep was I going to make this commitment? Was this unbelievably wonderful feeling that I was feeling going to wear off as soon as we got back on land and my real life began again? I had one particular friend, a guy named Dave, and Dave and I were the best at everything when it came to shore parties. Best drinkers, best fighters, just really had a lot of fun together. And deep in my mind was, how was I going to explain this to Dave? We had conversations more than one time about the sissy Christians on a boat. And here I was now a sissy Christian. What was I going to tell him? Well, we sat down in the front row of the church, and the pastor, of course, he was a chaplain, got up and started to speak the words of the service. And I'll never forget looking up across the row of chairs and looking right into the eyes of my friend Dave, sitting in the front row with a sissy Bible in his hand and a smile on his face. I wasn't the only one God was working on that ship. And afterwards, I went up to him, and I remember he said to me, did you ever think that it would feel so good not to be bad?